Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to for StarCraft 2 strategy. Today we're going to be taking a look at a Zerg strategy. Now in this particular replay, our Zerg player here is Mad Frog, and our Terran opponent is Chew Broccoli. So let's go into Mad Frog vision. There we go. So we're going to be looking at pretty standard stuff for Zerg against a Terran. Very strong and standard build is Go Speedling Baneling. Nope. The build we're looking at is actually Speedling Muta. A very strong and standard build against Terran is Speedling Muta. That's actually a pretty good build against Protoss as well, but in particular you see it more often against Terran opponents. So Speedling Muta, okay, pretty standard, nothing too fancy there. A couple of things we're going to be looking at: fast expanding, that's pretty prevalent in Zerg play as well. Droning up pretty hard early in the game. We're going to be seeing that in this game as well. And then one of the big things we're looking at is dealing with early game harass. We're going to be seeing some Hellion harass followed up with some Banshee harassment. And we're just going to show how to properly deal with those two things. In fact, Hellion into Banshee is something you can expect to have to deal with pretty often against Terran players. It's because it's very strong and a lot of Terran players like to use it. So as you can see so far, we haven't done a whole lot. We've just been droning up, and we're going to be working on our economy very strong early in the game here. We're starting off droning up pretty hard. In fact, we're not going to be dropping our hatchery until 16. Now that's a little later than you'll see a lot of people do it. A lot of times you'll see a 15 hatchery or even a 14 hatchery for a fast expansion, but we're actually going to be dropping that at 16. So just going to be going a little bit harder for the economy there. Realize that this can put you in a little bit of a dangerous spot, especially waiting to put that spawning pool down until later. But I mean, as long as, you know, with proper scouting you see whether or not an early push is coming, you should be fine. So as you can see, that hatchery did go down at our expansion, at our natural expansion at 16 supply. And then we're going to be following that up with a spawning pool right about now at 16 supply again, so we got another drone. We are going to be dropping that spawning pool, so it should be coming shortly. In his base, not seeing anything out of the ordinary. Should be seeing, yeah, there is a refinery right there, because we did see some guys bringing that Vespene gas to the command center. So we know so far a very standard opener. Not too concerned about anything in particular here. Back at the base, here is again that 16 spawning pool. As soon as that spawning pool dropped down, that put us to 15 supply, and then we went ahead and we put up our extractor here. So as you can see, you know, so far just working on economy, nothing fanciful coming out. Obviously we can't really build anything else because we don't have that spawning pool up yet, but that's the whole point. We're going to be working really hard on the economy early in the game here. Now we did almost lose that extractor. What we end up doing there is canceling that drone to try to get that secondary scouting, see what's going on. And again, everything we saw was pretty standard thus far. A lot of players like to start off, a lot of Terran players like to start off with that factory for early Hellion harassment, and that's in fact what we can expect here. So now with this expansion finally up, going to be getting 2 queens out. In fact, basically what happened was that hatchery ended up dropping at the exact time the spawning pool finished creating, and because of that we were able to create 2 queens simultaneously. So at 18 supply, as soon as the spawning pool came up, we put the first queen here, second queen coming out here at 20 supply. I'm also going to be getting an additional extractor that came down to 25 supply. We do of course intend on teching up, and again we're going to be getting that Speedling upgrade because we're starting off with Speedlings going into Mutalisks. And again, the big thing that we're going to be trying to look at here today is how to deal with that early harassment, the harassment that you can very well expect as well. So now the queen's up, don't want to be seeing that spew larva not happen, and not quite sure why, but that should be pretty instantaneous for you. Definitely want to be grabbing those queens as quick as possible and getting that spew larva down as fast as you possibly can. And now at this point, you know, we're going to be getting a few Zerglings. You can see that 4 are in creation here. We do have the Metabolic Boost coming, and that was at 26 supply that started. Just starting off with just the 4, that's all we really need. Essentially what we're going to want to do is grab in these Naga towers, get some forward scouting. I also suggest putting a Zergling outside of the ramp here. One of the best spots would probably be about in this position. That way, when he's up here, you can't really see it, but when he pushes out, you will be well aware. And you can see here, since we grabbed this Naga tower, there were actually 2 Hellions that we saw there. Now, because of this, what we're going to be doing is bringing our queens up to the ramp to try to block them from running into our main. And since we do have these 2 spine crawlers, now again, if you're going to be droning up very hard, like we are in this build, it's going to be pretty essential that you get spine crawlers. And the point being that we don't want to use our larva on Zerglings early on, since we're droning up. Again, now in droning up, we have to be using our larva on drones. So instead of getting Zerglings to defend early on, get a few spine crawlers. Again, we do have a couple Zerglings from those initial ones we made. Now at this point that we did lose that other Zergling that we had at this Naga tower, so we do see a pretty strong push is coming. So at this point, okay, now we can stop droning up, let's make some Zerglings, try to defend against this, see what we can do for a counterattack. Now, a big thing in defending that push that we just saw, I'm pausing here just so you know, it's not my computer freezing, I swear. A big thing in defending that push that we just saw is having these queens on the ramp, preventing them from running into the main. Since we have these spine crawlers over here, this area is pretty safe, coupled with those Zerglings. Pretty safe at that spot. Now you may be wondering a few things, one of which is, well, why are these overlords hanging out in the base instead of scouting your opponent? A big thing to worry about against Terran is a lot of Terran players like to go for Vikings, like even just getting 1 or 2 Vikings early on. And basically what that's going to mean is, unless you can get the speed upgrade for your overlords and shoot them back to your base once you see Vikings on the board, you're very likely to lose a lot of overlords. So it's not really the best idea, unfortunately. As much as you like to utilize these guys, it's not the best idea to have them spread everywhere, since the possibility of Vikings is fairly high. I mean, it's a pretty good possibility. So, you know, we defended off against that early Hellion harassment. Now, as you can see, we have teched up to a Lair, and we do have that Spire coming, because again, what we're looking at is that standard Ling Muta build. Very strong build, very effective. The Lair, we dropped down at 35 supply, and then the Spire came down at 46, basically as soon as that Lair finished creating. Now at this point we do see some Banshees on the board, so we have to deal with this now. What are we going to do? We're going to be warping in an Overseer. I don't know where that is. There it is. And we're going to be trying to keep our queens together. You can fend off a fair amount of Banshees with just queens, especially with that transfuse ability. Now the Overseer, we're going to need to make sure that he doesn't go into cloak and completely ruin our day, basically. So your best bet is to try to just follow around those Banshees with the Overseer. Don't stray too far from your base though, just in case he does lose you basically and then maneuver back into your base. You don't want your Overseer halfway across the map and not able to get to your base before he's done significant damage. So we're just trying to keep our queens together and using the queens with that transfuse to fend off these Banshees. Now obviously as soon as the Spire comes up, we're going to be getting some Mutalisks, and then with that we're going to be able to easily handle these Banshees. But until then, you're pretty much going to rely on queens. I mean, that's just the fact of the matter. Obviously you have that option of dropping Spore Crawlers, but truth be told, just getting this Overseer and then using queens to defend is probably a better option, simply because it's not very hard to move away from a Spore Crawler, but to move away from an Overseer and queens that are following you around is much more difficult. So, you know, if we had a Spore Crawler here, then he could easily just bring his Banshees over here, pick off this Extractor, pick off that Extractor, pick off some drones, and that's just the truth. You know, you much rather, truth be told, you much rather have mobile units that are capable of defending than static defenses, and that's just the way it works. So yeah, we have these Mutalisks out, going to be trying to move out and do as much harassment as possible, and then in doing so, while we know that we're harassing, we're going to be droning up, and we're also going to be expanding here. I mean, take full advantage of the fact that you're harassing your opponent to expand. There's really no reason not to. You can see here, got a couple Marines. Unfortunately, that is enough of a threat to push us back, especially with that Thor there. Really a big thing to learn how to do, I would suggest, if you don't already know, is learning how to magic box with your Mutalisks. Essentially what that means, the basic theory is, by spreading out your Mutalisks, it prevents the extra splash damage that you would be seeing from any Thors. So if you can learn to spread out your Mutalisks and move with them in that manner, and then engage Thors spread out as opposed to clump up, then you're going to be in a much better position, because you won't be taking that splash damage, and that drastically reduces the effectiveness of Thors against Mutalisks. So if you haven't learned how to magic box, if you haven't heard about it, I suggest going to Team Liquid, looking it up, and trying to learn how to implement it yourself, because it's a very, very effective tactic against Thors. Essentially, all Terran really has to deal with against Mutalisks is the Thor and then a mass of Marines. Vikings, really not the best option. Turrets, obviously pretty strong as well, but again, I talked about static defenses earlier, pretty easy to just avoid them. So all they really have are Thors and mass Marines. Now, mass Marines easily dealt with Banelings, Thors a little bit harder. You pretty much have to learn how to magic box, and we'll be seeing that here, as you can see, moving in and keeping the Mutalisks spread out as opposed to in one big ball. A lot of times Mutalisks like to clump up. If you can keep them spread out, they do much, much better. Now again, moving in with this Thor and these Marines, it's going to make it a little more dangerous. Until we can handle those Marines with either Speedlings or Banelings, we do kind of just have to avoid them. But I mean, here's the real advantage of Mutalisks, just moving around, picking things off, really puts you in a very strong position. Something else to note is we are getting that Carapace level 1 upgrade as opposed to that damage level 1 upgrade. The purpose being is that we much rather, since we're facing off against Marines and Thors, we much rather have some more survivability for our Mutalisks than a little bit more damage. That's just the fact of the matter. Against that particular matchup, when you're facing Marines and Thors, you much rather have that level 1 Carapace upgrade. So yeah, get that instead of the damage. It'll put you guys in a much better position. So as you can see here, we do have this expansion up, getting it pretty well saturated. Of course, making that extra queen. You do, at the very least, want 1 queen per hatchery or lair or whatever it may be. And even additional queens isn't a bad idea for spreading creep and stuff like that. Spreading creep, very, very important. Something that's often underutilized. As we can see here, Mad Frog is spreading creep, but you know, the more the better pretty much is how it works. And here's the real advantage to this build, Spieling into Muta. You can really contain your opponent because that constant threat of Mutas running into their base and harassing them really makes it so that they don't feel comfortable pushing out. I mean, as you've seen, he hasn't pushed out in quite some time. The last time we saw him, in fact, was with those Banshees in our base. And since we keep going into his base, here's another example of that magic box. Since we keep going into his base and harassing his mineral line and picking off units and buildings, it makes him very timid to push out. So that's, I mean, definitely something you want to utilize. That's the whole purpose of this type of build as well. Spieling Muta isn't really a brute force build where you just like throw all your units at your opponent. It's a build that allows you to pick off buildings, pick off workers, pick off units, and then just kind of run away when it gets a little too hot. And that's precisely how you want to play it as well. So as you can see, what happened there was moving Spielings into his base while distracting him over here, and as such we were able to do a significant amount of damage to this mineral line. And again, that goes back to what I just said. It's really more of a picking and prodding build than it is a brute force throw everything you've got at your opponent type of build. Another thing to consider doing, if you're at the point where you've pretty much expanded to all safe expansions and you still want more larvae, I mean, a lot of times mid to late game Zerg players sit on a lot of minerals, and that's just simply due to not enough larvae. So just build some more hatcheries. This was something you saw a lot of in StarCraft 1 and Brood War. People would build multiple hatcheries in their base. Now, obviously, we didn't have Queen's Den for spew larvae. That was kind of necessary. But at this point, you know, we start to get to mid-game. We're sitting on too many minerals. Build some more hatcheries, extra larvae. There you go. So you can see here, spreading our units one more time, seeing that magic box go into effect. Also engaging with those Spielings, taking out the threats in the Marines, and then surrounding those Thors. And that's pretty much the end of the game at that point. So yeah, pretty good build here. Again, Spieling into Muta, that's fairly standard stuff. I mean, it's not something that people haven't done before, I'm sure. But the important things to look at here were dealing with that early Hellion and Banshee harassment. And then also, you know, properly expanding. We talked about that magic box, which again, if you don't know what it is, look it up at teamliquid.net. Really effective strategy, should help you make those mutalists much more effective. So let's go into that build order real quick. We started off with that quick expansion at 16 supply, followed that up with a 16 spawning pool and a 15 extractor. Then at 18 supply, once that spawning pool came up, we put our first queen here, and immediately after, at that expansion, got our second queen at 20 supply. 25 supply, we saw that second extractor. 26 supply, started getting that metabolic boost, get those speedlings on the board as quick as possible there. And then at 35 supply, started getting this layer here. And then 46 supply, once that layer was done, we got that Spire. And that allowed us to get those mutalisks and move on from there. And yeah, you know, getting these extra hatcheries is a really good idea to get that extra larva. Because you are able to harass so effectively with speedlings and mutalisks, you can safely expand for the most part. Grabbing Xel'Naga towers, all of these things are great ideas. So once again, guys, this has been for StarCraft 2 Strategy. If you guys like our videos and you like what we're doing here, then please do go ahead and subscribe to our channel. Keep watching and keep owning, guys. We don't really need a ton. 5, 6, 7, that's probably the most that you really need to have that threat enough to the fact that he feels like he has to counter. Obviously, you could make more mutalisks at any point if you choose to, but this is the transition that I discussed earlier, switching into this Roach Warren. Once you start to see...